computer games. Why would I bring that up? Why would I bring that up? Because they are the most calculatorially complex, the most resource demanding, and the most advancement-driven area of computer software on the contemporary consumer market. Games require more complicated mathematical instructions, more system resources, i.e. efficiency is a bigger issue, and have to outdo their competitors in those areas in order to get significant market share. More so than any other area of software development. In other words, if you want to know what the state of information technology is, if you want to know where we're really at on the math of making a CPU actually work, you got to look at games. And we've got some great examples from games. John Carmack, in a GDC address regarding his acceptance of the Academy of Arts and Sciences Award for exceptional achievement in mathematics. Yes, John Carmack. John Carmack is one of the programmers, one of the lead programmers at idsoft. He wrote the Doom engine, the Quake engine, Quake 2 engine, Quake 3 engine, so on and so on and so forth, and is generally regarded as one of the one of the intellectual heavyweights in software engineering. But on acceptance of his award for exceptional achievements, exceptional mathematic achievements, for the Quake 3 engine. Little bit of validation for what I was saying earlier. He is being celebrated as a mathematician for the work that he did in writing the Quake 3 engine. Many years after the fact, Doom 3 is already on the market, and he was discussing the problems of effective engineering in the in contemporary information technology market. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, we got lucky with the Doom 3 engine. We got lucky. We had to guess where personal computing would be about 7 years ahead of time. We had to guess what kind of CPUs people would be running. We had to guess what kind of memory space they would have. We had to guess what their front-side bus speed would be. And we had to guess, and this is the real doozy, we had to guess what kind of rendering instructions their graphics cards were going to be using. And then we had to engineer for that guess and hope that we got lucky. And we did. And they did. But not quite. Not quite. When Doom 3 arrived, it was about 6 months to a year behind the competitive graphics cycle. It was about 6 months. It looked about 6 months too old. And the point to which it was being compared, the competitor to which its graphical, the rendering engine's capabilities were being compared, was the Source engine produced by ValveSoft. Now, by way of comparison, Doom 3 had almost a 9-year development cycle. Half-Life 2, which utilized the Source engine, and the Source engine itself, had about a 4-year development cycle. What's the difference? What's the difference? Why did it take John Carmack 9 years when it took ValveSoft 4? Efficiency. That's the difference. Efficiency. The Doom 3 engine utilizes virtually no external APIs. And don't worry, I'll explain this in a minute. utilizes virtually no external APIs. All of the rendering instructions are in the engine itself. Now, the upshot of that is that it is blisteringly efficient. I've gotten Doom 3 to run on an 80 megahertz processor. 80 megahertz processor with 256 kilobytes of RAM. It can actually run in that environment because the rendering engine is that efficient. The source engine, on the other hand, the source engine, on the other hand, no, you're not going to be able to pull that off. Why? Why is there this radical difference? Why is there this radical difference in engine performance? Because the software industry is well aware of the man-hour problem, is well aware of the fact that it takes, well aware of the fact that the rate at which a programmer can develop code has not been substantially improved. So, the solution is to reduce the amount of code that they have to develop. Reduce the amount of code that people need to write. And the primary way to do that is API. Let's say that I am working on a new 3D rendering engine, and I want to write it in a contemporary software market. There's this thing out there called DirectX, which is an API. DirectX, and we're up to DirectX 11. DirectX 11 has scads of predefined rendering functions. Scads of predefined rendering functions that say I want I want to be able to use diffused light sourcing. I just use the DirectX function for that instead of writing my own. Instead of writing my own function, I'll just use the one from this API. Well, I'm probably not building directly on the DirectX engine, on the DirectX API itself. I probably licensed an engine that was built on the DirectX API. So I'm going to use this function from the engine, this function from the licensed engine, that function from the DirectX API. I'm going to write a little bit of code so that they can communicate, and I can get the diffused lighting effect that I want. The problem, and this saves a lot of time. This saves a lot of time. This is what makes it possible to produce. I mean, think about. Just think about the process of writing. Think about how much text 8 gigabytes worth of text actually is. That's a lot of code. That's a lot of code. Look at the go ahead at some point. Take a look at the hard drive footprint of the game of your choice. That's a lot of code. That's a lot of code. It would take decades to write it all by hand. It would take decades to write it all by hand. But that increased increased rapidity comes at a cost. And that cost is efficiency. That cost is efficiency. Because you were utilizing functions that are something like what you want, they're not exactly what you want. They're something like what you want. Or you are utilizing functions that have an entire library of operations that they can perform, and then you are telling it to specifically do one of them. You're losing efficiency. You're losing efficiency every step of the way. Every layer between the programmer and the language of the firmware of the hardware itself is a loss of efficiency. And the way that we have been offsetting the man-hour problem is by losing efficiency. In 2001, Steve Ballmer, addressing an MSDN conference regarding language and API standardization development for the .NET platform, said, and this was a very interesting moment, said, "We no longer need to be efficient because the client can always buy more RAM." We don't have to be efficient anymore. Because there was this presumption of unlimited overhead. Unlimited overhead. Well, we now know that that's not true. We know for a fact that that is not true. That the presumption of unlimited hardware resources just hasn't panned out. And that if anything, the demands of software are spiraling out of control, and the rate at which hardware development can keep up is diminishing, and largely because of the necessary inefficiency in order to produce a software product on a timeline in which it can actually be profitable. All because we regard the human being as a constant. See how we get back to, all because we regard the human being as a constant. That the rate at which I think, the rapidity, the flexibility, the agility with which I think, is a constant, because we regard it as a constant.